Welcome to another episode of Metal Mastermind. Your host, Jason Stallworth, and we've got co-owner of Metal Mastermind and host,
Ken Candelas.
What's up, dude?
It's a pleasure to see you, man.
Man, we're back at it again. Guys, we're going to talk about three things that all kind of relate to each other. And what is hardcore? We'll cover that first. Then we're going to get into what I like to call putting in the work. What does that really mean? Then we're going to kind of tie it all back around towards the end and talk about the reality of burnout. It's a real thing.
Yeah. Burnout. Oh my God. We can talk for a long time about what it means to be burned out. I think for people who are going the indie music route, this is a real thing that we have to learn to mitigate. My experience, well, let's talk about hardcore, right?
Yeah, let's get hardcore. What does that mean to you? What does hardcore mean to you, Ken? Like
hardcore, man, I think relentless in your daily pursuit of your goals. Also, I think habitual tendencies, I think are part of that. I would say, for example, my experience with like doing audio engineering and working long hours is, that kind of work is pretty hardcore. There were days where I was up for like 72 hours because
that's rough.
My job at Good Morning America was very much hard to deal with on a timely schedule. You'd have to be there at 1 a.m. You'd probably get out at around like 10 a.m. And by that time, the sun's out, it's almost noon, and you want to keep staying up because you're just full of energy from the sun. Yeah. And so you start taking jobs that are right after work, and you're just like, okay, let's do this one. And then by the time you get back home, it's really late. And then before you know it, you have to be back at broadcast at 1 a.m. again. So That was really difficult. That was hardcore. My experience. Schedule. Yeah, that's definitely an example of a hardcore schedule. I think, though, people can be hardcore about many things, and work schedules is just one of them. You could be hardcore about family but be a devout father or mother and make the best out of your child's experiences in life. That's also a version of being hardcore. What does it mean for you?
That was a really good point. I'm glad you tied that back around to something that is really actually positive. I mean, we're talking about, your work schedule, how that's a hardcore schedule that's not easy to adhere to because it really disrupts everything else in your life, and your life becomes centered around that kind of a crappy schedule, but then you tie it back to family, how you can go in hardcore with other things that are maybe healthy in life. You want to be a good, a good spouse first and foremost, in my opinion, because if you're not a good spouse, and everything else falls apart. You guys who are married out there, but no, hardcore to me, I think it's different things to different people. A lot of people have told me, well, Jason, you get up at 4:30 a.m. in the morning to go work out every day. Well, that's hardcore, and I used to think that was hardcore, but to back it up a little bit, there are other people, and I'm not a bodybuilder. I mean, you guys know that I've been lifting weights and training and into fitness for my entire life since I've been playing guitar since 88, 89. Man, it seems so long ago, but I looked at it as hardcore, in at certain times in my life, but now, like, okay, I get up and train at 4:30 in the morning. I'm in there hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, weights, cardio, come home and I stick to that. You mentioned being consistent. You mentioned something along the lines of being consistent. And I think that's a version of hardcore for some people, but there are other people now that really train a lot harder, than I do, and maybe stick to the regimen and the diet and all that. Well, they may not wake up at 4:30. They may do it at 2:00 in the afternoon, where the schedule doesn't seem as hardcore, but that doesn't mean that I'm more hardcore than them, because maybe they're training for a competition, whereas me, I just do it because I love to do it. It's a part of who I am. So I think hardcore can have a different meaning. And real quick, I don't look at my schedule as hardcore because it's a natural time my body wakes up. You know, if I have a live gig the night before, of course, I'm not getting up at 4:30. It might be 6 or something like that. But in any case, I enjoy doing that first thing in the morning because it's the way I like to start my day. So to me, I've learned to treat 4:30 a.m. just like any other time, 10:30 a.m. Why has it had to be any different? It's just a time I get up to go work out. So but going back, other people may not wake up that early. They may be into the regimen more hardcore than me. So again, hardcore, I think, means different things to different people.
Yeah, because we're all gauging things differently in life to begin with. So it's hard to put, how would you say, a pin in where this is the standard of what hardcore is.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of different experiences from our life that I feel just gauge what does that entail for us.
Yeah.
So we have to just find out what's our limit, really. And I think that's where this comes down to, is understanding your boundaries as a
Yeah.
person. What's the absolute most that you can handle at capacity, and sometimes that's harder than it sounds to find. I mean, it's easier said than done. This is kind of a thing where you have to go and test yourself in life to see to what extent you're willing to go in that route. And it was actually, if I, continue that story of being an audio engineer at Good Morning America, was actually one of the reasons when the pandemic hit, I decided to leave because I realized how much it was actually taken away from the things that I actually valued in life.
They want you to come back. You're like, no, thanks. I don't want that schedule.
No, yeah, they wanted me back, and I said, that's just, I'm not that interested in that work anymore. I wanted to do different things, and by that time, we were already working on Mental Mastermind. I'm working on my music, and I said, I love engineering and stuff like that, but I actually love being an artist more. So that's something I really wanted to focus on. So, that was a part of my life that needed, reevaluation, and what I was willing to go more hardcore for. So yeah, it's a game of balance, and people will have to just go through it to get to it in a more simpler sense.
And I think we need to focus on the result more so than, because I think sometimes people like to wear a badge of hardcore. Well, I'm hardcore. And they put things out there on social media, their best,
Oh
of
yeah.
course, and that's the world we live in. And when you're talking about hardcore, again, it's different for everyone. And you can't really, Ken, you and I have talked so much, and I think we started our first or second podcast with this about comparing yourself to other musicians and to other people in general. You guys, this all ties into music as well. It ties into being a musician. Are you hardcore enough to practice, 6 hours a day, or why not 16 hours a day? Well, what is the result going to be from that hardcore thing that you're doing? I mentioned earlier my
Right.
workout schedule. I'm not looking to be Mr. Olympia, right? So I'm not looking for that result. My result now is, like I said, I'm kind of an older dude. I'm 40. I'll be 48 in May. So my result I'm looking for is to be strong, to be muscular, but also have longevity and health, which I have. So I want to maintain that. You know what I mean? I know I had to exercise to do that. So, that's my result that I'm going for. Now, do I have to be hardcore to make that result? Well, what I do to some people is hardcore because they can't get out of bed in the morning, right? Maybe they're going through something, maybe they're out of shape and they can't make that first. Well, I don't want to say they can't, but they're not allowing themselves to make that first step, right? And guys, this is not a fitness blog, I promise. I'm just giving this as an example. And,
Yeah. Well, I want to touch on that point of social media influencers. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
I think being hardcore, or the sense of being hardcore, is certainly something that is attractive. I
sure.
feel it makes people, I guess, on the inside feel empowered
Yeah,
about doing something a lot. That's that's certainly something where you can wear a badge of honor in a sense if you're, really rocking it. I mean, people are killing it out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
all the more power to them. I think that's great. I also recognize, though, that the messaging behind that is not always the healthiest because sometimes, when somebody says a certain message, and this is something that, we try to be very conscious of is how we deliver that message too, because if you say something like, oh, yeah, you got to get up and you got to just work your ass off and do the thing in order to make it happen. That's great, but there's also nuance to all of that. Like,
right.
okay, where are you in life to be able to do the thing that you want to do is another consideration. And who are the people that are around you that you care about? How will this affect how you interact with your family? How will this, these are certain things that some people don't really think about until they go through it and they see certain results out of that. So I want to say that this kind of, I always knew it as like the hustler's mentality,
Sure.
where it's just go day after day, just hashing away at your goals. That kind of mentality actually was something that I was trying to do with my own music. And at a certain point, it was toxic because I was so tunnel vision on my music that I didn't have any sense of balance to how I was moving through in my life. And I felt like I was just kind of making the slope a little steeper for myself.
Yeah.
And it was harder to get out of. So those kinds of mentalities are good to an extent. I think you have to always take a step back and say, all right, well, is now the time to work or is now the time to rest? Is now the time to bond? Is now the time to learn? What is it that your season is right now, which is something that our good, friend and mentor Leah McHenry used to say, which is, what season are you in? Are you in if you're a musician, are you in a composing season or are you in a marketing season?
Yeah.
But this can balance through a lot of things in life, right? So you're thinking, am I in a position where I need to work more because maybe I'm slacking on what I want to achieve in life? Or does that entail me having to regroup and reassess where I'm currently at right now and restructure my, I guess, my core fundamentals? Those types of things are super important, and you can't just disavow that because you want to be hardcore. It's just,
well, seasons are crucial, man. You mentioned seasons. Yeah. I remember Leah, by the way, we get no money for this, guys, but we both graduated from Leah McHenry's Elite Savvy Musician Academy. That's how Ken and I met. We'll do a podcast just on that one day if you guys want, but that's how Ken and I met many years ago. And she mentioned that seasons. And I think there's a season to be hardcore, so to speak, but you mentioned rest, and I'll go back to the weight training mentality. Your muscles don't grow when you're in the gym working out. A lot of people are like, I'm just going to push it to the extent. It's good to push yourself. I'm a big believer in that, but that's not when your muscles are growing. If you don't give your muscles those time to rest and recover, that's when they grow. When you're sleeping, when you're eating, you're refueling them with the appropriate nutrients, the appropriate amount of protein and so forth, and rest. That's when they grow. If you just continue to be hardcore and work out all the time, work the same body parts all the time, you're probably going to get diminishing returns on the time invested. So you do have seasons, Ken. You and I are both working on an album right now. We're both kind of, you've got the Homeric release. I've got the album Overcometh. Who knows? We might release this stuff at the same time, man. But right now we're in a phase of kind of like, you've already recorded all your parts, I believe. I've still got some stuff to record, and we're kind of finalizing everything. After that, though, we're going to switch gears over to the marketing phase, right? Which means we probably won't be doing a lot of composing and writing, maybe some, but we're going to be more focused on the marketing aspect, how to get it out there, which is something I'm excited to talk more about. To help you guys. Ken and I, we've learned a lot about marketing as independent musicians, and of course, we do want to share that with you guys. A lot of powerful stuff to come on that, but yeah, the seasons are important. The time of rest is important, and which kind of gets us into talking about putting in the work, which is one of our tags on the podcast here. You have to know not only when to put in the appropriate work and the appropriate amount of work, but also the type of work. I'll share what one of my bosses told me a long time ago when I was in corporate America. I worked for a large corporation, and they want you to do everything. But she would always tell me, it's like, Jason, when she'd see me get frustrated, she's like, you're trying to boil the ocean. Don't try to boil the ocean.
Yeah, that's a great line to walk away with, because we sometimes are impatient with the process, and this sort of thing just takes time. Especially if you're going to be an indie musician, you can't expect overnight success. I tell my students every time, you're going to go down this route, it's a 10-year minimum.
Yeah.
It's a 10-year minimum. And that they look at me and they're like, oh. And I look at their faces and I said, yeah, but you know what you get? You get your independence, you get your freedom, you get the ability to control what it is that you want to do with your music. You have nobody, holding this over your head. That's priceless in my opinion, but it comes with hard work, and it is a bootstrapping mentality of, okay, I'm going to start it as a grassroots type of movement here, and we're going to build. And putting in the work means just a little bit every day, just to make progress in some way, shape, or form. But you can be methodical about it. You can say, today, I'm just going to focus on writing like this verse. Tomorrow, I'll try and write a chorus. And by the end of the week, maybe I'll put a song together. Maybe the week after, what I'll try and do is I'll organize time. And you're blocking out time to do this, of course. You want to make sure that you do something like that, so that when you are within the scope of a certain amount of time, your mind is put, under pressure to make something happen within that time. So you have a series of sort of cascading events that I guess you can say you can reverse engineer. You want to make an album. How do I make an album? What are the steps that I need to do to make that album? And you start tackling just, what's on that bullet list. And just little by little, you're putting in the work. Putting in the work doesn't mean you have to tackle every one of those things at the same day. That would be the equivalent of trying to be hardcore.
Yeah, that'd be a disaster.
But that could be a disaster. Sometimes there's good days and you have those moments where you can make things happen, or you get a lot of that stuff done. But it's not always going to be that way. And most of the time, it's going to be slow. So you have to be patient with yourself and patient with the process, knowing that this is all for the sake of trying to make something great. And you don't want to, and I love this phrase, I like to think of making my music as baking it in an oven, because an oven takes time to cook the meal, right? I don't want to make my music feel like it was a hot pocket in a microwave.
In a microwave, yeah. No.
We don't like that, because it's just, hot pockets are great for a momentary satisfaction, but they are not a memorable meal.
Listen, my wife cooked a roast yesterday in the crock pot, and that thing took, not a lot of effort to prepare it and all, but that crock pot roast, man, it just sat in there for like a good 6-7 hours. And it was so good. Just, oh man, I got some leftovers for later, by the way. I wish you were here, Ken. I'd share it with you. But, you two points to what you're talking about. One, sounds like if you listeners missed our, I think it's our very first podcast when we talked about scheduling. You
Yep.
mentioned scheduling. You've got to schedule these things out. You can't just reach for the pie in the sky. It's like, well, I want to do all these things. Okay, I'm going to do it this way. Well, if you don't schedule it, if you don't write these things down, and we don't care if you use a Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, or if you want to go old school and just write that stuff down on a piece of paper, as long as it's something you're going to see on a daily or at least weekly basis, and you're going to stick to that.
Right.
Because like you said, you have those days. Yeah, we have those good days. Usually Mondays are my workaholic days, my quote unquote hardcore days. And my wife knows that I'm probably going to work 12 to 14 hours those days, but realize that the next day may not be that way, right? It probably won't be that way. And it may not be that way the next few days after that. So don't let yourself get discouraged if it's not like that, if you can't keep up that quote unquote hardcore momentum, because consistency is going to beat hardcore every single time.
Right. Yeah. And there are ways to help keep you focused. For example, my music comes with quite a bit of artwork. So a way that I always remember to put my music in the forefront of my focus is I have my artwork as my wallpaper on my desktop. I always see it every day. I turn my computer on. So
awesome.
It's just a reminder, right? And some people, they like sticky notes, or they like motivational cards, or they like motivational posters that they frame on the wall. Whatever that is for you, that is a method of always remembering to recenter what it is your main driving focus, right? So have some sort of way to display that every day in front of yourself. That's going to help you keep on track, right? Putting in the work means, yes, you're working. It doesn't mean that you're just staying busy. It means that you're making efforts to progress. So you want to be sure that what it is that you're doing on a daily basis, and maybe it's not always daily, but it can be every other day, you're attributing something, but you're always measuring yourself against yourself, what you're doing to make your goals happen. You have to do that. I mean, there's no way around it. You have to really dedicate to saying to yourself, okay, this is something that I want out of life. And I know that going to my job just on a daily basis is going to eat away at something that I'm trying to do at life, right?
It's going to suck, right?
I mean, it does. Like,
it does
some people enjoy the work. I do enjoy my work, but at the same time, every time I'm at work, I'm not working on my work that I want to do, which is my music. Yeah. So I'm very aware that all of that is going to take away. So I have to put more work to making it happen.
Yeah.
It's just sense. You have to, when you're at home, yeah, there's totally a time to sit back and relax. And many times we're very tired after work. I understand that, but you have to find some way to make that effort to hit your goals. One of the ways that worked for me is I choose to work my job in the evenings, because during the day I have more energy to work on my music. So that helps me a ton. And that's something that some people may have the luxury of, some people may not. If you're a person who has to wake up early to go to work and you have to find time after work, then I would try to find where in your weekly schedule you can dedicate just a block of time just to make that your day to work. Maybe for some people it's the weekends, but for me, the weekends are times where I like to spend with my significant other, because since I work in the evening, she works during the day. We don't really see each other during. So that's when I dedicate time for rest. But during the week, I do, during the day, my own projects, my own music.
And just so our
So
listeners know, Ken, you have a job, but you're in the music industry, like Ken's job, and not to belittle the fact that you have to go to that and work. But we both are in the full-time music industry here in some capacity, and you're an educator at the college level. So you're teaching, audio engineering, you're teaching things like even some
yeah,
marketing and theory and that sort of thing. So, and that's what's great about you have made choices in your life. This is very important, guys, to set you up to where you can be a full-time musician at multiple capacities, right? So
right.
not only are you working on your music, not only are you and I running Metal Mastermind, but and all that goes with that, because that's almost like having three full-time jobs, but we love what we do. But you're also in the industry. Sometimes I feel like, even though I don't have a regular day job, I left the corporate world in 2020. Maybe we'll share that story another day. This is an interesting one, but I do trade time for money, in a sense, when I play live solo acoustic gigs. Started doing that around the time I left City to supplement everything else. And I wanted to get back on stage, in some way. I didn't want to lose the stage presence, because I haven't played with a band in quite some time, other than filling in here and there for some bands. But, the solo acoustic gigs, just like, your teaching gig at night, of course, those are at nighttime. And like you said, that can take a lot of energy. Sometimes the
Yeah.
gigs are late, and the next day I might not feel like doing much of anything. I'll wake up anyway and go hit the gym. But after that, I might come out going, I'm like, man, sometimes I just want to have a couple beers by the patio, or just watch some TV with my wife. Her and I spend a lot of time together as well. So going back to the rest, guys, you need to structure things where you have phases for the quote unquote hardcore work. And I really don't even like to use the term hardcore, because again, it's different for everyone. And someone might say, well, I'm more hardcore than you are. You're not
Yeah.
hardcore, blah, blah, blah. And get into this competitive thing. And it's just not worth getting into. Just put in the work that you need to put in. Push yourself a little further, because you're so much more capable of doing more than what you think you are. And what I like to tell folks is, we're not really looking for the things. Like, people aren't looking for big houses and cars and a wealthy bank account and that sort of thing. They're looking for the emotions that they believe having those things will give us. So what I challenge you and all of us, myself included, what I'm trying to do more of is get into that state of mind already, where you already have the things that you want in life, right? What does that make you feel like? So Ken, you and I are talking about albums, and I know most of our listeners, you guys would like to release something at some point, or do something. And even if it's not in the musical realm, maybe you want to start your own business, maybe you want a promotion, whatever it is, take a few moments, you can call it meditation or whatever you want to call it, but just take a few moments and visualize the emotion that you're going to feel when those things have manifested in your life. And, we talked about this in, I think, 2 podcasts ago, maybe it was last week's, but how your brain does not know the difference between the reality you're living right now and the one that you're imagining, right? So the more you dwell on those things, not saying that you'll be able to just poof, magically make everything appear. That's not how this works, but rather, because you're focused on those things and getting your brain used to experiencing that emotional state of these things being accomplished, you're going to make the appropriate decisions to start making that happen.
Right. Yeah. That's a great way to put it, because when people talk about stuff like law of attraction, it makes it feel more mystical than it really is.
Right.
It's actually just very basic. You just got to put your mind to something that you really want, and you have to make the necessary steps to make that happen. That's
Right.
just basically at a fundamental level what you need to do.
Yeah,
So
you're absolutely right. Like we talked about in our first podcast, we said that you want to plan, execute, and measure the results.
Yep.
That's how you move forward in life. And whether you
Yes.
choose to meditate or dwell or whatever, you need to plan those out. And Ken, you brought this up earlier, man. You've got to make the plan for those different phases of your album or whatever it is that you're doing. map that out, plan it, and then execute. Take action on those steps and measure the results. Is it
Yeah,
working? Is it not?
because being hardcore is just simply unsustainable. It's honestly, to get into our last point, it's a recipe for burnout.
Right. Yeah. It moves us right into burnout. That's why we wanted to talk about this. But have you experienced burnout recently, Ken, or like, and how did you deal with that? And how are you dealing with that?
Well, I experienced burnout with my own music at a time. When I had my entire debacle with my band breakup, that was a total burnout for me. My attitude of go 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 on my music taught me two things. That one, I saw what I was capable of doing, and then two, I also saw that not everybody can go.
Yeah.
So me doing that, I mean, I had to take basically a couple of months of a hiatus just to kind of recover from the trauma of that band breakup. But I mean, it led me to reorganizing how I wanted to pursue this project. And at the end of the day, it brought me to meeting, you know, one of my own heroes in metal, which is Michael Romeo, and it also brought me to one of my own inspirations, Jonathan Kruk, who is a storyteller and wonderful person who I was listening to his stories since I was a kid. Then it also brought me to David Milgate, who's worked on, you know, Judge Dredd, and he's even done a cover for Heavy Metal Magazine. You know,
I love Judge Dredd.
These are things that I just realized were part of my experience when it came to my music, and it just made me realize how valuable it was. But the burnout needed to happen for me to restructure that. I needed to realize how important this was to me. So knowing that, it was one of the points where I said, okay, I've been also burnt out working all these audio freelance gigs for 12-hour days, 16-hour days, and I'm just tired of it. And I said,
I remember that.
I said, no more. Not doing that, because yes, it was good money, and some of that was some of the best money I've made, but I wasn't able to do anything else. I was just working for other people. And I realized, and no offense to people who are in better financial states than I am, but when you work for people who are just wealthier than you, they just, I don't know. It's not a good time for me. I just always like, I should be the one. I always said to myself, I should be the one who needs this service and not me having to do something for somebody else. That's probably always been in me ever since I was in my teens, where I've always wanted to do my own thing. And I guess that was the voice in the back of my head that was just kind of clawing at me like, you're working for the big man right now. And it's just like, So I just had this screaming voice inside me that wanted to just do more than what I was just doing. And I knew that working, you know, freelance gigs of audio, even though I love audio, it wasn't going to do it. And I had to refocus. What was I going to do in order to make that happen? And honestly, that's why we came over and did Metal Mastermind for a good chunk of our reasons.
It is, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, because like when I was leaving my corporate job in early 2019, long story short, I had been there, you know, about 13 years at that point. I was there 14 years total. And you know, I told my boss in the beginning of the year, it's like, look, we do cuts every year. So what corporations do, I'm raising my hand if we cut in our department, please pick me. So lo and behold, that happened. I left the job. But I remember, you know, that last year, especially that last 6 months, you kind of check out. She's like, look, I'm just mentally done. Ken, this is going to sound like weird and kooky, but it was painful for me to type on the keyboard, even the days I work from home. And think about having a corporate job that pays you nicely. I never complained about my salary. I made a really good salary at that place, but it was painful even working from home. The luxury of working from home. You're like, Jason, man, this is first world problems, and not really a problem, but it was painful for me to type on the keyboard. The days I'd go in the office, I would get there late some days, Ken, and I would, because I knew if I got there late, I'd have to park in the overflow, so that would take me longer to walk to my cubicle. Just trying to delay this process, and there were still, even then, times I'd sit in the car, listen to music, and text a buddy or something. Sometimes I'd text you even, and I'd sit in the car for 10 minutes, and I had to pull myself out. So I was so burnt out, though. And again, I don't want this to sound like I'm complaining. I'm not. There's two sides of this. There's the side that sometimes companies put so much on you, and you got to do this, and that. Oh, and you need to do more, by the way. And I just wasn't willing to work the long hours anymore. I had checked out. But there's the other side that I knew I needed to be putting my focus and time and energy into my own thing. Ken, you and I have had the vision for working for ourselves probably since our youth. I remember cutting grass, mowing yards. It was, it was hard work, but it was kind of cool. I can go mow somebody's yard and make $20, and hey, that bought me 2 cassette tapes back then. This is, late 80s, early 90s. And, I remember doing that, the kind of the freedom of doing that, not really having to answer to a boss, so to speak, and I'm doing my own thing. You do it well and whatever. But yeah, the burnout is real, and I get burnout even sometimes, doing what I do now from a musical perspective. But what I'm trying to do, trying to be better at is, first of all, I've got this thing to where I have to make a YouTube video every, how often. I try to put out 2 a week, but like this week, I will probably only put out 1. It's been about 7 days since I've released a video on my channel. I'm not letting that get to me because I've been very busy. I've had a private gig, some other gigs, and some other things going on, the updates to the courses. By the way, guys, we just updated 2 courses, the free upgrades. If you already have them, they're still at the discounted price. So you'll get the upgrades. But Metal Producer Overlord, the mixing series taught by Nick Z. And in yours truly over here, Ken Candelas, his metal music theory course, we added some guitar parts to that where we saw, where we felt it was relevant. So, we've been working hard on that. So I'm not going to beat myself up about, well, I didn't get this YouTube video out. You know what? I'm going to film one after we film this podcast today. And that's just going to be it. You do what you can do, and you just let that be it. Right. So I'm really just trying to live more in that moment and not be in this, we got to rush to get all this stuff done. Oh my gosh, I'm not there. I'm not where I want to be. And just, take a moment to focus on what you're doing, what needs to be done at that very moment, and nothing else. That's it.
Right. You have to always take a step back and just realize, what is the thing that makes it feel like it's burning out for you, and try to understand where it's coming from. Because if you just ignore it and you just keep trying to push through, it's just a bottled up problem that's going to explode, and you might explode onto, somebody that, you care about, and you didn't really mean to get upset at them. And, it's not a good day. So you want to just, when you feel that sense of, oh my God, this is a lot. And why does it feel that way? Are you doing too much right now? Is there something that you need to put off so that you can focus on making this other thing happen? Yeah. It's all, or sometimes, if you're, business owners will understand this. You can only do so much. Sometimes you just need to delegate. Right? So that might be a sign that if you are growing, you might need a team member to help you out. And that's, that's a good thing. It's a good problem. Yes. So
very good problem to have. Yeah.
You want to just keep constantly assessing your mental state of where am I right now? And, this is not something that is necessarily always a very conscious effort, but I think on a day-to-day basis, it's good to be aware of it and just to say, how am I feeling today? Am I rested? Do I have what I need to get what I want done today?
Yeah.
What's an obstacle that's in the way that I need to tackle today in order to make what I want to happen tomorrow? Those types of things are ways that we can help just shift our focus from feeling like we're just being a victim of, circumstance and just, oh, we can't get it done today because XYZ, versus, okay, how am I going to just make this happen so that I can make this next thing that I want happen, being a problem solver. That kind of mentality will get you really far in life. So I strongly, for anybody who feels like at the time right now that they feel like they're burnt out, just reassess. And
Yeah.
maybe you just need it. Maybe it just requires that you just need a day off. And I was at a bar maybe a couple months ago, and I was talking to the bartender, and I was with some colleagues from the college, and I've seen this guy at the bar like several times all the time. And we asked him, he was just like, hey, like, do you ever get a day off? He's just like, no, I've been working like 7 days a week for a month and a half straight.
Wow,
I said, you need to get a day off tomorrow.
Yeah.
You need to make time for yourself because, okay, yeah, the money's good, but like, what are you getting out of it? Like, you're just working at the bar every day.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with the money that you're making from that? That's just, I realize, and like, I love guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and stuff like that, but
I'm a big fan of Gary Vee. Yeah.
I realize, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jason, but when I've noticed Gary change his messaging over the years, going from earlier being, hey man, it's all about making it happen and hustling, doing the thing right now, to focusing less on hustling and more on attributing happiness.
He talks about that a lot. Yeah. So one thing that he used to always put out there, because people would judge him, and I'll kind of paraphrase real quick, but people would judge him like, well, how can you work all these hours? That's unhealthy. And Gary says, look, this is my truth. Your truth may be different. And this is really where we come into assessing what's best for you and your situation and circumstance. Maybe you're trying to get out of debt, for example. So you're going to bust your rump for 3 months, maybe 6 months. Maybe you don't take a day off, because at the end of that, you've done the calculations and you'll be debt free, and you can kind of pull back a little bit, right? Or maybe you're saving for something. So that goes back to our seasons. What is your season right now? Only you know that. I can't tell you. Ken can't tell you, well, you need to work more hours on this, or we can't tell you you need to not work more hours on this. We can only tell you that you have to be honest with yourself, brutally honest with yourself, and assess, like you said, Ken, reassess your life, your schedule, write down what truly needs to be done to get me closer to the goal. You mentioned earlier, Ken, a lot of times we can fill up the notepad with to-dos, but you know what, guys, you can run in place really fast, put forth a lot of effort, burn yourself out, and not go anywhere. That's the truth. Going back to Gary Vee, though, he said, this is my truth. Okay. I work a lot. I love it. And I make it work with my family. Okay. It just works. That's my truth. My truth may not be your truth. But that said, now I have seen a little shift in the messaging. He's always kind of, mentioned doing what makes you happy and that sort of thing. But I'll go a little bit further than that. And it's kind of the same thing, I guess, Ken, is what you and I do. Learn to love the process. And I think how you do that without getting burnt out is going back to visualizing what's the emotion that you're going to feel, that you expect to feel as you accomplish these goals that you're working on. You and I, what's the emotion of my album Overcometh and your album with Homeric? What is our emotional state with that being released and it's out there and you're getting the feedback from people like, man, Ken, I love this album. This is so cool. So I think that emotional state is where we need to try to stay in order to
Right.
love the process, to love the journey along the way. And it doesn't feel so much like work. And on top of that, I think you're able to micro focus on one thing at a time instead of worrying about, well, I've got all this to do. How am I ever going to get there? You get there by taking the step one, which is right now, today, after you finish this podcast, break out that notepad. Maybe go back and listen to our first podcast on planning, right? Plan, execute, and measure your results, and just start making the steps. And just, okay, here's the first step, execute. I'll worry about step two when I get to step two. I'm not there yet. I'm at step one, but continue to push yourself and follow along, one step at a time.
Brilliantly said, man.
But I love Gary Vee. I listen to you and I both. We listen to our fair share, probably, of motivational folks out there in the entrepreneur space, because that's what we are. And I'm proud to say that about us, Ken. We're growing, and hey, who knows? We may be delegating this year as well. I know we've got Emily helping out with with our Discord. Thank you, Emily, so much. By the way, you've been such a great help. If you're listening to this, we appreciate you. But we do look to grow the team. And we'll be talking to her first about that when the time comes. I probably shouldn't put that out there, but Ken, any parting thoughts, man, before we wrap things up here?
Just remember your why. This is all about, why do you do what you do, and how you go about, in this case, managing your time to make your dreams come true. What we talk about here at Metal Mastermind is how to, improve yourself in the studio, on stage, and in life. So,
yes.
By listening to our podcasts, it tells us that you're interested in self-development in a way that is going to help bolster your fervor to make whatever it is in your life that much more enriched. So take that as you will. Don't forget why you do what you do, and just live aggressively, man.
Do it. Guys, in parting thoughts here, do check out metalmastermind.com. We have got courses for those of you who don't know, first-time listeners. Thank you, by the way. Hey, guys, please share this podcast as well. Share it with someone, whether you're listening on our platform, metalmastermind.com, or Spotify. I believe we got the podcast on Spotify podcast and Google Podcasts as well. But please do share and make sure you subscribe to those podcasts on your preferred source. But also, check out metalmastermind.com for our guitar courses. We've got online coaching on there now as well. So do check that out. And want to thank everybody for tuning in to Ken and I. We love having these sessions with you. And of course, as always, create your own sound.